To our friends at Trian, to Mr. Nelson Peltz and Mr. J. Rasulo, and yes, to Mr. Ike Perlmutter, good evening. My name is Valliant Renegade, and I am a Disney shareholder. I've spent the last 3 years on YouTube putting Hollywood through the business and financial lens of reality. It's what we do here at the Renegade Nation, now nearly 60,000 subscribers strong. Matter of fact, we probably get more people watching us cover the Disney earnings call than the earnings call itself. And like you, I'm concerned about the direction of Disney, although we probably pull fewer punches than you do in your press releases, and understandably so. That being said, I want to thank you for allowing the folks out there this opportunity to voice their concerns. There are many. And as we cover the Hollywood and entertainment industry, let's just say that Disney has gotten far more than its fair share of attention thanks to an endless supply of news items that it inflicts upon itself. It was our channel that pushed the box office doldrums of the past 12 to 18 months of the Walt Disney Company into the national limelight.
That's according to a number crunch by prominent YouTuber Valliant Renegade, who argues that many of Disney's recent so-called hits barely broke even or flat out tanked.
And sure, that's a great bragging point, but more important to me is the attention that it brought from the average Joe out there, and hopefully even to the fine folks like you at Trian, because you see, one of the things with Bob Iger I think a lot of us are very well aware of is that, well, perhaps his ego is a bit bigger than the House of Mouse itself. And I think that's one of the biggest problems at the Walt Disney Company. Just ask Mr. Ike Perlmutter. Bob Iger loves to jingle the shiniest, newest set of keys in front of Wall Street faces each and every earnings call. Well, we don't fall for it as easily because it's nice when Bob goes out and spends shareholder capital to buy a bunch of shiny new toys, but if you look just slightly beneath the surface, you find out that he's more or less doing that to cover up the fact that the original toys or the older toys that are still sitting at Disney that were once the belle of the ball are now rusty, broken, tattered, and tired. A lot of attention gets paid to direct-to-consumer these days. A lot of attention is being diverted by Bob Iger to things like new sports streaming conglomerates with the likes of Warner Brothers and Fox. Anybody want to ask NBC, Comcast, and maybe Paramount how they feel about that? But I digress. Then there was the $1.5 billion investment with Epic Games after closing its own video game studio years ago called Lucasfilm Arts, something that Disney spent, at least in part, $4 billion to acquire from George back in 2012. What we should be asking ourselves is what happened to the nearly $10 billion of capital investment that the Walt Disney Company spent by way of Bob Iger for the boys, Star Wars and Marvel. The toys, the merchandise, they're not performing that well anymore, save for Spider-Man. Even classic Star Wars stuff is going by the wayside, at least insofar as what Disney is reporting. Just ask partners like Hasbro, who are suffering right now. I guess it's just one hell of a coincidence that since Ike Perlmutter was sidelined in 2016 and 2017, and then later dismissed from Disney in the last year, that, well, things for Marvel have gone to pot. And Star Wars, while it had a great start with The Force Awakens, never really went anywhere since then because, once again, just like Phases 4 and 5 in Marvel, Disney has transitioned these properties now for girl power. And we've all seen the results at the box office and, yes, even on Disney+. Disney has burned some near $2 billion in shareholder capital on making a bunch of failed movies in the last 2 years, and it doesn't look like it's going to get any better anytime soon. One thing that Disney has done unquestionably well in the last several years is destroy its own talent pool. The people who made Disney and Pixar, the people who made Disney Animation Studios for the last several decades. A lot of the veteran talent is gone. Just ask our friends over here at Film Threat, like Alan Ng and Chris Gore, who have covered this exquisitely now for the last several months, with sources from inside the Walt Disney Company itself to tell them how bad things have gotten. And while employee diversity in and of itself is never a bad thing, what is a problem is when a company puts that diversity ahead of everything else. Things like merit, talent, experience. And the story has continued on Film Threat to tell us exactly what's going on inside of Walt Disney Studios. It's the reason that things have looked so bad and performed so poorly in the last several years. The overriding socio-political desire to have diversity, equity, and inclusion has killed the meritocracy at Disney. It has killed the quality that Walt has built. Certainly, people from all backgrounds are capable of amazing and talented things, but when you put irrelevant and immutable conditions like race, ethnicity, and gender above everything else, inevitably, things are going to fail. And it's not just the men who have checked out of the boys' properties like Marvel and Star Wars. Disney is now suffering these same effects from its studios with the girls. How is it in the same year that Barbie came out and delivered a near $1.5 billion box office, did Disney release a live-action remake of The Little Mermaid, one of the most popular, if not the most popular Disney princesses of the last 30 years, one of the biggest sellers Disney has ever had, and only get about 1/3 of the box office result after spending over twice as much to produce it?
I wonder.
Disney Studios, including Pixar, Animation, Marvel, Star Wars, the whole gamut. These are the things that feed and drive the merchandising sales. These are the things that drive traffic to the theme parks, which Disney seems to have no answer to Universal when it opens its next gate called Epic Universe next year in 2025. Disney likes to keep telling folks that, well, the family audiences just aren't ready to go back to theaters, or at least that's the lie we've been told now for the last year. Meanwhile, other films from other competitors, like The Minions: Rise of Gru, or how about Super Mario Brothers? Well, they're doing just fine, but what's going on with Disney? Given all of that data, my question to Trian is simple. What can you guys do specifically to help restore the magic at the Disney studio system? It's the driving force for everything else. Sure, Disney can transition itself into becoming naught but a live sports company, or maybe even an Epic Games Fortnite partner, but what about the Disney that we all grew up with? What about the Disney that our grandparents and parents grew up with? Is that just going to go away? Is that no longer going to be a driving force of revenue behind the Walt Disney Company? If you look right now, it seems like it may not be. Will Trian be able to unwind some of the toxic work environments that have been created at the Walt Disney Company over the last several years? Again, I'm sure Mr. Perlmutter and Mr. J. Rasulo know exactly what I'm talking about. That's going to be one of the biggest challenges, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you think can be done to bring the studio system back, to try and return some of the talent that Disney has driven away and replaced not with folks who are experienced or educated in the traditional sense, but, according to some out there, cut their chops on places like Tumblr and TikTok. The brain drain is the biggest threat at the Walt Disney Company, and it's only getting worse each and every passing month. I hope that you find, ladies and gentlemen at Trian, can come up with something to reverse course on that, and we'd love to hear about it. Thank you for your time.